Hello everyone and welcome back to the MTG Novels Project. The MTG Novels Project is available both on YouTube and as a podcast version. Check the description for more details. A legal note. This is an unofficial audiobook with original content belonging to Wizard of the Coast. This content is covered under the 2017 Wizard of the Coast fan content policy. Listener discretion is advised. Today we're reading Chapter 9 of Planeswalker by Lynn, Abbey. Cold fog rolled down from the mountains. Xancha's fingers stiffened, and the rest of her grew clumsy. When she wasn't tripping over her feet, she dropped bundles and cursed loudly, not caring if she disturbed the two men on the other side of the wall. She didn't disturb them. Urza had a new audience for his tabletop. He wouldn't notice if the world ended, and Rebetepe was playing the dangerous game Xancha had told him to play, and playing it better than she dared hope. She'd all but told him not to pay attention to her. She could argue begrudgingly obedience, or fail to notice that Urza's door was unwarded. She could have left the sacks where the sphere had scattered them. Rebetepe, Rat, Mishra would have been defending her to join them. Xancha had been tempted to walk to the door, if only to hear what the young Effund would say. Which, considering all that held in the balance, was a selfish temptation. She resisted it until the last of supplies were stowed in the pantry, and the fog had matured into an ice needle rain. Inside her room, with the shutters bolted against the chill, Xancha found herself too tired to sleep. Eyes open and empty, she lay on her bed, able to hear the sounds of the conversation behind the wall, without catching any of the words. She piled pillows atop her face, pulled the blankets tight, then threw everything aside. Before long, Xancha had wedged herself in the corner at the foot of the bed, with her knees tucked beneath her chin and a blanket draped over her head. Xancha tried to think of other things, of her first conversation with Urza. "There's a shelter at the bottom of the hill. Take me there. I'll show you the way to Phyrexia." Urza frowned. Xancha had rarely seen a face creased with her displeasure. She expected his jaw to fall to the ground, but her rescue was flexible. A newt like herself, or one of the born folk about whom she knew very little. When his frown had sunk as much as it could, it rebounded and became a bitter laugh. She knew the meaning of that sound. "It's the truth. I will show you the way. I will take you to Phyrexia, though. It's only fair to tell you that Avengers stand guard at the fourth sphere ablator fields, and will be destroyed at the spat." "It's gone. It's got in the way," her rescue said, still laughing. "The ablator's nether edge should be there, unless you let the searcher get away. The diggers. They don't know how to roll an ablator, and the bearers can't." Xancha tried to rise and felt lightheaded. Felt light all over. It was an unprecedented feeling. Every time she stepped into a new world, there was a change. A different texture in the air, a different color to the light, a different sense between her feet and the ground. She took a deep breath to confirm her suspicions. The hill and shelter are where I remember them, but I'm not any place that I remember. Yes, my clever child, I brought you here, and I will take you back. The hill is there, but the shelter and this ablator of which you speak, alas, is not. Xancha thought she understood. You drew the prime end through itself to bring me to this place," she hesitated. "But this man who had rescued her deserved the truth. If you anchored the ambulator, I don't know if I can take you to Phyrexia. I've seen a certain priest set the stones for Phyrexia, but I've never set them myself. I don't know what her face will be if I set them wrong, but I'll go first." "No, child, you will not go first," he said, grim and serious. "Though you have every reason to condemn Phyrexia, you have become a traitor to them, and traitors can never be trusted. Must never be trusted." Traitor! The word roused 100 others from Xancha's dreams. She supposed it was a truthful word, though not as truthful as it would have been if she weren't a newt who'd never been compliated. Insofar as kin prickled her conscience, it was safe to say that she had none. "I was Orman Huzra when you find me, second of the Dodgers. What is my position now? What is yours? What do I do if I cannot be trusted, and I cannot go first? The man paced a small, stark chamber in which she had awakened. His eyes burned as he walked, reminding Xancha of Gix. She had lowered her head when he stopped in front of her. He put his hand beneath her chin to raise it. Her instinct was to resist, to avoid those eyes as she had avoided the eyes of Gix. But he overcame her resilience. Her rescuer had a demon's strength. Orman Huzra. That is not a name. What is your name? In my dreams, I am Xancha. The answer failed to please him. Fingers tightened on either side of her jaw. She closed her eyes, but that made no difference. The many-colored light from his eyes burnt like fire in her thoughts. Your mind is empty, Xancha, he said after an agonized moment. The Phyrexians took it all away from you. He was wrong. Were it not for the Phyrexians, Gix, in particular, had done to her, Xancha was sure she would have died right then. She didn't correct her new companion, no more than she had corrected Gix, and took no small satisfaction in the knowledge that the sanctuary she created, when Gix had confronted her, remained intact. What is my place? What is yours? She asked her a second time. What do you do? My place was Lord Protector of the Realm, and I failed to do what I should have done. You might call me Urza. There were images for the word Urza, hideous images. Gansa heard the voice of a teacher priest. If you meet Urza, destroy him. The man in front of her didn't resemble the image. Even if he had, Xancha would have denied the imperative. She wasn't about to destroy an enemy of Phyrexia. Urza, she repeated. Urza, I will show you what I know of the ambulators. Xancha tried to raise from her pallet. The ambulator had to be beyond the chamber's closed door. It was too large for the chamber itself. She got as far as her knees. In addition to feeling light, she was weak, but there were no marks on her bodies. Her wound had healed. Xancha didn't understand. She'd been weak before, but never without wounds. Rest, Urza told her, offering her the corner of a blanket. You've been very sick. Many days. At least a month have passed since I brought you here. But not through any ambulator. I did, as you suggest, let the searcher get away. My error, Xancha. I did not suspect your ambulators, and seeing your kind on that other plane, I thought you'd walk there. My grievous error. The emptiness between the planes is no place for a child without the necessary spark. You were less than a heartbeat from death before I got you here, which is not where I'd intended to bring you. Do not touch that door, he warned, then had an inspiration and pointed his forefinger to it. The wood glowed and became dull gray stone, like the rest of the chamber. The Phyrexians changed you, Xancha, and I cannot undo their changes. But without what they did to you, you would have lived long enough for me to do anything at all. This place is safe for you. It has air, and a balance of heat. Outside there is nothing. Your skin will freeze, and your blood will boil. Without the spark, you will not survive. Do you hear me, Xancha? Can you empty your mind and understand? Xancha had no sense of modesty, but not soon after leaving Phyrexia, and the air in the chamber was comfortably warm. Yet she clutched the blanket tight around her naked flesh, the same as she clutched it a minute later in a cold, dark cabin room, while sleep pelted the roof overhead. Her empty mind never had a problem understanding Urza's word. It was the implications that often left her reeling. I understand, she asserted Urza. This is my place, and I remained here. But I do not know about months. I know days and seasons and years. What is a month? He closed his eyes, and after a dramatic sigh, told her about the many ways in which born folk measured time. Xancha told him that Phyrexia was a place where time went unmeasured. There was no sun by day, nor stars by night. The first sphere sky was an unchangeable, featureless gray. All the other spheres were nested within the first sphere. Gix had been dropped into a fumarole that descended to the seventh sphere. The ineffable dwelt in the ninth, at Phyrexia's core. Interesting, Urza said. If you're telling the truth, I've heard the name Gix before, on my own plane, where it was the name of a mountain god before the Phyrexians stole it. In 50 years of searching, I've heard the name of Gix many times. I've heard the name Urza, too. Several that sounds like Sancha. There are only so many sounds that our mouths can make. So many words, so many names. At best, language is confusion. If you are to be so useful to me, you will never lie. Are you telling the truth, child? She nodded and truthfully. I am not a child. The image was quite clear in her mind. The world for which she had been destined, the world for which she had gone, had children. Children are born. Children grow. Phyrexians are decanted by vat priests, compliated by the pretender priests. When I was decanted, I was exactly as I am now. I was not compliated, but I was never a child. Gix said he made me. Urza shook his head sadly. It is tempting, very tempting to believe that there is only one Gix. But I have made that mistake before. It was just a sound, a similar sound filled with lies. You do not remember what you were before the Phyrexians claimed you, Sancha, and that is just as well. To remember what you had lost. He closed his eyes a moment. You would not be so strong. By your face, I'd say you were 12, perhaps 13. He shook a thought out of his mind and began to pace. You were born, Sancha. Life is born, or it is not. Not even the Phyrexians can change that. They steal, they corrupt, they abominate, but they cannot create. You remember the decanting, and I am grateful that you remember nothing before that, because I am certain you were just horribly transformed. In my wandering, I've seen men and women in many variations, but I've never seen one such as you, who is neither. Urza continued pacing the small chamber. He wouldn't look at her, which was just as well. Sancha knew many words for madness and delusions, and they all described Urza. He had rescued her, saved her life, and he had strange powers, not mere in his glowing eyes, but an odd sort of passion that had left her believe in a few distracted heartbeats that she'd been born on the world at the bottom of her memories. Sancha ached in the missing places when Urza described her as neither man nor woman. After Gix's excoriation, when she'd hidden among the goblins, she had opportunity to observe the differences between the two fikes of born folk, men and women. If Urza was right, she had even more reason to raise war against the Phyrexians. But Urza had to be wrong. He didn't know Phyrexia. He had never peeked into a vat to see the writhing shape of a half-grown newt. He had never seen tender priests throwing buckets of rendered flesh into those vats. Meat sludge was the source of Sancha's memories. Meat slugs and Gix's ambitions. Nothing had been taken from her. She was empty, as Urza had told her, filled with memories that weren't her own. Urza confirmed Sancha's self-judgment as he paced. Yes, it is better that you don't remember. Better that your mind is empty, and you have no imagination left that could fill it. Mishra knew what he had become. It drove him mad. I will keep you, Sancha, and will avenge your loss as I avenge my brother. You will stay here. Sancha didn't argue. She was in a chamber that neither windows nor doors. Her companion was a man even with glowing eyes. There was nothing at all to be gained by argument. Still, there was at least one question that had to be asked. May I eat? Urza stopped pacing. His eyes darkened to a mortar brown. You eat? But you're Phyrexian? She shrugged and chose her words carefully. They didn't take that. I ate from a cauldron when I was in Phyrexian, but I scrounged when I was excavating. I can scrounge here, if you show me where the living things are. Nothing lives here, Sancha, Urza muttered under his breath. His hands began to glow as his eyes had. He strode to the nearest wall and thrust his finger into what appeared to be solid stone. The glow transferred to the stone, and the chamber filled with hot, acrid smells. Sancha remembered from the furnaces. She eased backwards, blindly clutching the blanket as if he could protect her. There's a hole in the wall now, and a radiating mass seething in Urza's hands. Bread, Urza said, when the seething mass had cooled. Sancha had scrounged bread in a few of the worlds the searching priest had taken her to. The Stephen loaf Urza handed her looked like bread, and smelled a bit like bread, a bit more like overheated dust. Its taste was dusty too, but she'd eaten worse, much worse, and gorged without complaint. Do you want more? She didn't answer. What was an empty notion? Newts didn't want. Newts took what they could, what was available, and waited for another opportunity, which might come soon or might not. Urza faded until he was a pale, translucent shadow. Then he was gone. A heartbeat later, the chamber's light was gone too. Every world Zanja had been to had spun in its own rhythms, and though she had acquainted an indistinct sense of day becoming night, she learned enough about time to be desperately afraid of the dark. She was ravenous when Urza finally returned, exhausted because she feared to close her eyes lest she sleep through his reappearance, and bleeding where she'd pinched herself to keep awake. Taking all her events at once, Sansa sprang across the chamber. She clung furious to Urza's sleeve. I won't remain here. Bring back the door. Let me out or destroy me. Urza stared at her hands. I brought you something. Swallow it, and I can, as you say, bring you back the door. He held out his free arm and opened his hand, which held a nearly transparent lump, about half the size of her fist. Sansa had eaten worse meals in the Faint of Fleth, but he didn't think Urza was offering her supper. What is it? She asked, not letting go with either hand. Consider it a gift. I went back to the plane where I found you. The Phyrexians were careful to clean up after himself, but I was more careful looking for them this time. I found a place where the foil had been transformed by black mana, much as you had been. So I believe you, Sancha. You're almost what you say you are, almost a Phyrexian. You believe the lies they told you when they transformed you. They took your memory and your potential. You're a danger to others and to yourself, but not to me. I will unlock your secrets and find answers I need for vengeance. I'll help, Sancha agreed. She agreed to do anything to get out of that chamber. After that would take care of itself. Letting go of his sleeve with one hand but not the other, she reached for the lump. Urza swung it beyond her reach. You must understand, Sancha, as much as you can understand anything. This is not bred to be wolfed down like a starving animal. This is an artifact. When you swallow it, it will settle in your stomach and harden into a cyst, a sore of stone that will remain there as long as you live. Then, whenever we travel between planes or dwell in a plane where you could not otherwise survive, you will say a little rhyme that I shall teach you, and yawn mightily at its end. The cyst will release an armor that will cover you completely to keep you alive. You will complicate me? Urza glowered. Sancha felt him pursuing her thoughts, her suspicions about the cyst. He rummaged through her measuries, yanking on them with the loose ends of a stubborn knot. Did he believe that Uzra human knew nothing but artifacts? She retreated into her private self. He sensed her escape. He saw the questions and displeasure on his face. Urza wasn't flex, no more than Gix, but he had the habits of flesh and all the stubbornity of a fresh decanted newt. Like a rabbit flies into the brush, he said, and looked beyond the chamber. Tears lurked from Urza's eyes, especially his left eye. Then he shuddered, and the tear tracks vanished. No, I don't complicate. That is abomination. My artifact will be inside you because that is the best place for it. But it's a tool, nothing more, and never a part of you. Never. I cannot erase the memories of Phyrexia from your mind, but you are no longer Phyrexian, and you must not think of Phyrexian abominations. Artifacts are tools, she recited, as she would have recited to the teacher's priests. A tool that she would swallow, but that would remain in her belly forever, without being a part of her. It wasn't reasonable, but reason wasn't important to a Phyrexian, and she would be a Phyrexian forever. Urza let the lump flow into her hand. It was cold and clinging. Sancha's stomach churned in protest. Gagging, she lost her grip on Urza's sleeve and nearly dropped the artifact as well. Swallow it. Swallow it whole. Do not chew it. Waste not, want not, Sancha muttered. Waste not, want not. He raised her hand to her mouth and nearly fainted. She tried again, breathing out as she raised her hand. The artifact quivered and hardened. Then she closed her eyes and slurped it down without inhaling. It stuck in her throat. She slapped her hands over her lips, finding the instant to spit the lump across the chamber. For something that was only a tool, Urza's artifact felt alive as it oozed down Sancha's throat, got comfortable in her gut, and hardened into a stone. She was on her knees, banging her forehead on the floor, when the horrifying process finally stopped. See, all over. Nothing to it. She rested her head on the floor another moment before pushing herself upright. I'm ready. Her voice was different. The artifact had deposited trails and it had moved down her throat. It still clung to her teeth and tongue. She coughed into her hand and studied drops of spittle that glistened briefly, then turned to white powder. Urza taught her the rhyme that would release the Sith's power. Pressure built up in her gullet as she repeated it. The yawn that followed was involuntary, and a sense of an oily liquid surging from within covered her completely, within 2 heartbeats. Would have driven her to hysteria if it had lasted for a third. Urza clutching her wrists. The Sith's liquid, her armor, tingled. He began to fade, and looking down, Zancha saw himself fading as well. She barely began to scream when her substance was covered by clothing less fine than Urza's, but finer than the rags she'd known on her life. Tempted to follow the dark blue sleeve, she discovered it was illusion, visible but intangible. Later, Urza assumed her. Not long. I won't have a naked companion. Look upon this. Tell me. Have you seen a lake before? Zancha gathered her wits. They stood on a bare rock plain. The sky was as cloudless blue pale. Light came from an intensely white star, so high overhead that she thought she could have been hot and sweating. Yet the plain was cold and the wind colder. She could hear the wind and see the dust it raised. When she thought about it, Zancha wasn't sure at all how she knew it was cold. With Urza's armor surrounding her, she felt nothing against her skin. The sensation or lack of sensation so intrigued her that Urza had to clear her throat twice before she saw the dragon. With that, she said into his voice, I shall destroy Phyrexia. The dragon was dead bright in the sunlight. Zancha walked closer until she was certain that it was indeed made from metal, even though, when she touched a pillow-like hand she couldn't say which metal. It was a bipedal in structure, and her head came barely to its bent knees. Its torso, as yet unfinished, was a maze of tanks and tubes. Naphtha, Urza explained before she asked her question. Phyrexians. The Phyrexians mean to destroy, are leaked with oil. They burn. Zancha nodded, recalling the four-sphere lakes of slag and naphtha, and screams that sometimes arose from them. Scarfing struts excluded from the dragon's counterbalanced tail. She seized one. Urza warned her to be careful. She had no intention of being anything, but he'd asked a question, and she meant to give him an answer. The Sith-made armor moved with her, however. Zancha contorted herself, even hanging by one knee to get a better look at the claws on the dragon's somewhat short arms. If the arms were short, its teeth were long and varied, sharp spikes, razor-edged wedges, rasps, and crushing anvils, all cunningly geared so that whoever sat in the Urza-sized gasp between the dragon's shoulders could bring his best metal weapons to bear on a particular enemy. If a gout of flaming naphtha food proved insufficient to destroy them. More unfinished scaffolding rose above and behind the dragon's shoulder. Protection, she guessed, for Urza, but possibly he intended to finish his engine with wings. She judged it little more than half finished, and already heavier than anything she'd seen on the first sphere. Perhaps he's conducted a more potent fuel than glistening oil. Zancha finished her exploration without finding the source of the engine power. After dangling from the dragon's forearms, Zancha dropped 3 or 4 times her height. She was out of practice, hitting her chin on her knees as she enjoyed the impact. Her lips should have been a bloody mess. She was pleasantly impressed with Urva's gift. But as for the dragon, if you had 100 of them, her voice was definitely thicker and distant sounding in her armor-plucked ears, you could take on one of the Fanes and hold it against the demons, but not against the ineffable. You don't appreciate what this is, Zancha. I've built a dragon 10 times stronger than anything Misha or I had during the misbegotten war. When it is finished, not even the Thran could stand against it. Misha shrugged. She didn't know the Thran. It will have to be very powerful then, when it is finished. You have been blinded, Zancha, by what they did to you, by what you can't remember. But they're not as powerful as they made you believe. My dragon is finished when I found the rest of what I need. Found? Her scavenging courage had been aroused. You found this? You did not make it? as you made the bread and the tool? I found the materials, Zancha, and I shaped it to my knees. To make a dragon like this, to make it as I made your bread, even for me, would be exhausting. In the end, Urzlord's voice, not quite real. Zancha cocked her head. The bread filled your stomach and was nutritious. It would keep you alive, but you wouldn't thrive on it at least. I don't think you would. When I was a man, I could have thrived on it. Things that are made, whether they are made from nothing or something else, no matter how well they are made, aren't quite real. It's easier, better, to start with something similar to what you want to have at the end, and change it, little by little. Complicate it. Yes, Urza began, and stopped suddenly, and stared harshly at her, eyes a shimmer. No. Compilation is a Phyrexian taint. Do not use that word. Only artifacts can be made. Everything else must be born, must live and grow. Zancha studied her companion with equal intensity, though her eyes, of course, could not sparkle. We were taught that the ineffable made Phyrexia. Lies, Zancha. They told you lies. I was told many lies, she agreed. Urza took her wrist again. Until now, he said, I have dwelt here beside my greatest artifact, but now I've taken charge of you. I will have to have a dwelling in a more hospitable place. It is no great inconvenience. For every hospital plane, there are several out-of-the-way planes like as this. While these planes have supplied me with the ores I need for my dragon bones, they aren't where power stones are to be found. Zancha had started to ask what a power stone was when her armor began to tingle, and Urza began to grow transparent in the stark sunlight. Then they were underway before Zancha could ask where they were going, and though she had already guessed that her image for a world was the same as Urza's image for a plane, getting dragged from one world to the next, with his hands clamped around her wrist, was worse than sinking through the ambulators. Whether her eyes were open or closed, Zancha saw the many-colored streaks whirling around her. Every sense, every perception, was stretched to its extreme opposite, and held there for what might have been a single moment, or might have been an eternity. The silence was deafening, the cold so intense she feared she'd melt, the vice-like pressure so great she feared she'd explode. And to complete the experience, when Urza finally released Zancha, her clinging armor transformed abruptly into a layer of white paste. Pushed past her limit, Zancha gave into the panic and terror, clawing the residue as she ran blindly from Urza. She tripped, as was inevitable, and fell hard enough to knock the wind from her. Urza knelt and touched her. The armor residue was gone in an instant. I tested on myself, he explained. He helped to her feet and laid hands on her scapes, heating them with a gentle heat. Zancha had endured much in her unmentionable life, none of it gentle. She pulled away when she could, and realized he'd brought her back to a place where she'd been beating. Parting her lips, she tasted the air. The tang of glistening oil was faint, stale. They're gone, she said, and not long after I rescued you. The locals would have known the Phyrexians had ever been here. I would not have known, if I had not found them first. This is the place, the very place where they brought you, where the last of them stood before leaving. Zancha scuffed the ground with his boot. There's nothing visibly different, but movement released a scent of glistening oil to the air. It is a familiar place for you, isn't it? You lived here, found food here, conquered your nightmares, Zancha. The Phyrexians will not return. They are cowards, Zancha. They only play upon the weak. They grasped my brothers, but they never came to me. They know me, Zancha, and they will not return. This will be the place where you can dwell while I complete my dragon, the place where you can lay out your wretched memories for my understanding. Zancha tried to understand her new companion, and failed. He was wrong, simply wrong, about so many things. Yet he did have the power to walk between worlds. No Phyrexian, not even a demon like Gix, could do that. Urza did not give orders, not in a Phyrexian sense. Still, Zancha had no opportunity but to obey him as she had obeyed Gix, silently and without grace. She started up the path to the caves. Where are you going? Let him haul her back. He had that power. Or let him follow, which he did. The cave was sealed, of course, and carefully, with stones, dirt, and plant life. The locals, as Ursa called them, wouldn't know the treasure of their ancestors had been plundered. But Sancha knew. She began pulling weeds and hurling dirt from her bare hands. Urza intervened. Child, what are you doing? I'm not a child. They brought me here to extract an army. If it's gone, then you'd be right, maybe right that no Phyrexian will return here. If it's not, Sancha went back to her work. You'll be digging forever, Urza pulled her aside. There are better ways. For a moment, Urza stood stock still with his eyes closed. When he opened them, they blazed with quizzum light. A swirling cloud about twice as high bloomed into the air before the clave-sealed mouth. He spoke a single word whose meaning, if it had any, Sancha didn't know. And the cloud rooted itself where she had been digging. Fascinating. Sancha attempted to pull her hand to the small, bright windstorm. Sancha touched her arm, and she could not move. We'll come back tomorrow, and we'll see what has to be seen. Meanwhile, we'll find food. It's too long since I enjoyed a meal, and you will begin telling me everything you remember. Urza took Sancha's wrist and pulled her into the between worlds, before she could recite her armor-releasing rhyme. The journey lasted less than a heartbeat, less than an airless breath. They emerged in what Urza called a town, where Sancha found herself surrounded by born folk, all flesh like her. All different, too, and chattering a language she couldn't understood. He took her to an inn, gave orders in a boiled folk language, told her to sit in a chair as he did, to drink from a cup and use a knife and a fork rather than her fingers when she ate. It was difficult, but Urza was adamant. Sancha ate until the knife, at least, was comfortable in her hands. Later there was music, exactly as Sancha dreamed it would be, and dancing, which she would have joined if Urza had not said, "Too soon, child. Your eyes are open, but you do not truly see." When the music and dancing had ended, Urza led her from the inn to the night, and through the unforeseen world of the forest. He was gone when Sancha awoke, long after sunrise. The scent of gishling oil was stronger, wafting down from the cave. She remembered the knife, and wished she had put it in her hand, even though it would have been useless against a Phyrexian, or Urza. Urza resigned this cave, and so with most of the artifacts. Tiptoeing in the brink of an excavation trance, Sancha watched Urza dismantle one of the insect warriors. He was faster and more powerful. When his mandible claws closed over his ankles, they shattered. The Tana's whips burned and melted when they touched his face. Perhaps one dragon would be enough if it was Urza's dragon, with Urza's sin between its shoulders. Sancha cleared her throat. They're coming back. They wouldn't have left all this behind. Waste not, want not. That's our way. Urza left in the air and covered in front of her. The Phyrexian way is not your way, Sancha. Not anymore. But otherwise, yes. I believe you were right. I am ready for them tomorrow. Though let us hope it's not so soon. With time to study the automata, I'll be more ready for them, Sancha. These could almost be Thran design. They're pure artifacts, no sentience at all, but perfectly adaptive. Look, he held up a fluorescent ring, a power stone that isn't a power stone. There's water in here, light and simple mana, the essence of all things. I shall call it Photon, because it burns without consuming itself. It will give me power for my dragon, more power than I ever dreamed. I shall redesign it. Vengeance, Sancha. I will take vengeance for both of us. When the Phyrexians return, I will destroy them, pursue them all the way back to Phyrex itself. That was Chapter 9 of Planeswalker. Thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, and follow on YouTube and on your chosen podcast platform. And I'll see you next time.